our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Donald Trump has not only made a mockery of the European Union with his new trade deal, but the Labour government itself has finally admitted our better trade deal wouldn't be possible without Brexit. Hurrah! As the government takes its assault on free speech to a new level, tonight I will be joined by Councillor, who was reported to the Rozzers simply for asking questions about migrant hotels. Meanwhile, in the latest evidence of the failures of mass migration, new data have revealed 4 in 10 people charged over sex attacks in London are foreign nationals. Plus, we'll be telling the untold story of the 1 million white European slaves taken by the Islamic world that the Britain bashers don't want you to know about. State of the Nation starts now. I will also be joined by my most incisive panel, the former Labour MP Stephen Pound and the economist and fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy, Catherine McBride. As always, I want to know your views, and you know where to send it, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Good evening to you. Our headlines. President Trump has set a new deadline of 10 to 12 days for Vladimir Putin to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. He and Sir Keir Starmer have arrived in Aberdeenshire. It's part of Donald Trump's 4-day trip to Scotland. They will meet the First Minister John Swinney for dinner shortly. Now, in an earlier meeting at Trump's Turnberry golf course, the US President again threatened to impose sanctions and secondary tariffs on Russia unless it engages in ceasefire talks with Ukraine. He also acknowledged real starvation in Gaza, telling Israel to allow every ounce of food in. Downing Street says the two leaders agreed urgent actions needed to bring an end to the suffering, which has reached new depths.
It's a terrible situation. The whole thing is terrible. It's been bad for many years. But it's great to hear you feel the same way that I do. We have to help on a humanitarian basis before we do anything. We have to get the kids fed. Hamas has become very difficult to deal with in the last couple of days because they don't want to give up these last 20, because they think as long as we have them, they have protection. But I don't think it can work that way. So I'm speaking to Bibi Netanyahu, and we are coming up with various plans. We're going to say it's a very difficult situation.
Sir Keir Starmer says England's Lionesses have once again captured the hearts of the nation. The players are at 10 Downing Street right now for a special reception after returning home as European champions. They beat Spain on penalties last night to become the first English team to win a major tournament on foreign soil and the first to win back-to-back titles. Now, an open-top bus tour will be held tomorrow along the Mall to Buckingham Palace in central London. That starts around midday. Reform UK says it would scrap the Online Safety Act. The party argues the measures intended to force social media companies to limit harmful content would instead be a dystopian infringement of free speech. Nigel Farage, though, acknowledged his party does not have a perfect answer for what would replace it. The older brother of Oasis stars Noel and Liam Gallagher has been charged with rape and a number of other violent offences. Paul Gallagher from East Finchley in North London is also accused of sexual assault, coercive control, strangulation and making threats to kill. It's alleged to have happened between 2022 and 2024. He's due to appear in court next week. Pharmacists are warning that surging demand for weight loss injections could become unsustainable. A new poll from the National Pharmacy Association reveals more than a fifth of UK adults and more than a third of people under 35 have tried to access weight loss medication over the past year. Experts say, though, patients are unsuitable in many cases and they risk treating the injections like a quick fix. Finally, the Kings marked a series of anniversaries linked to the nuclear industry on a visit to Caithness in the north of Scotland. His visit marks 70 years since engineers at the Doornray site first began experimenting with nuclear energy, and the visit also celebrated 50 years of Pacific Nuclear Transport Limited and 20 years of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. Those are your headlines. I'll be back with more at 9. Now it's back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. President Donald Trump's Scotland visit has, as ever, exceeded expectations, but has perhaps most importantly set an example for the UK. First, we saw a masterful performance in his negotiations with the European Union, showing us what a strong sovereign nation looks like.
I think it's the biggest deal ever made. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
The EU conceded to a deal that prioritises American interests, particularly in key industrial sectors where the US had long been at a disadvantage. That's what happens when you have a leader who understands power and isn't afraid to use it. But the good news, the further good news, of course, is that the UK is not in the same position as the European Union. We're in a better position. We have our own trade deal, which gives us better terms than them. And crucially, we were able to negotiate it for ourselves, something we could not have done whilst we were in the European Union. Even the socialists, even this Labour government has now admitted this. But Donald Trump's example doesn't end with trade. He was earlier on taxes.
So I think that I have a theory that low taxes bring growth. We just passed a big tax cut bill, the biggest bill in the history of our country, actually. And one big, beautiful bill. I used to call it the great one big, beautiful. We got the word great out. But it's actually called the one big, beautiful bill. It's essentially a very large tax cut bill for everybody.
That's exactly what we need, a tax cut bill, but also on censorship, which we will be discussing further in the programme.
If they censor me, you're making a mistake. Will you please uncensor my site?
Yeah, we're not censoring anyone.
No, they're censoring anyone they can. Censoring you in a moment, just wait and see. But here he was in response to GB News' own presenter Bev Turner's question to the Prime Minister about migration.
Europe is a much different place than it was just 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And they've got to get their act together. If they don't, you're not going to have Europe anymore as you know it. And you can't do that. This is a magnificent part of the world, and you cannot ruin it. You cannot let people come in here illegally.
And Trump has shown that you can actually reduce illegal migration. 91% reduction in illegals crossing the Mexican border in April of this year. So at every turn, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, the Reverend Starmer, has been outshone in how to lead and advance a nation's interest. Rather than paying the Chagos Islands or the Mauritians billions to take the Chagos Islands from us, or giving millions to Singapore for potty net zero projects, or handing over the use of our fishing waters to the EU, we need to look at what Trump does and put the United Kingdom first. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But with me now is a really first-class panel. The former Socialist MP, well, former Socialist and certainly former MP, Stephen Pound, and the most distinguished economist and fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy, Catherine McBride. Catherine, first of all, thank you for joining me. You are one of the great experts on trade in the United Kingdom. This is a really good deal for America, isn't it? And the EU's basically caved in.
Well, it's interesting because we don't have the final deal yet, so we can't read the fine print. And Ursula von der Leyen said some very strange things. In her publication, the EU, as usual, always make their own statement. They say that this is 15% is a clear ceiling, no stacking, and it's all inclusive. Now, the president doesn't have that power. The president has raised tariffs. He can raise them for two reasons: for security reasons, which is the steel and the aluminium and the cars, and the other ones, the 10% for us and the 30% for the EU, was what they call IEEPA tariffs. And he's lowered those 30% to 15%. But they are, these are additional to your most favoured nation tariffs. And the most favoured nation tariffs are determined by the Congress in America. So the president doesn't change those. So I think Ursula is mistaken. She will discover they're adding 15% on to the most favoured nation tariffs.
And Guy Verhofstadt isn't best pleased either, is he? He's a bit of a temper tantrum about this, though he's quite highly strung.
Well, he thinks that he could have got a better deal, but he thinks everything would be better if he was in charge, including the UK. I mean, Guy is the ultimate fascist. He wants to run everything. He did when he was in charge.
Well, that's a bit unfair.
Well, okay.
I'm sorry, you can't call Guy Verhofstadt a fascist.
OK, well, he wants to run the place.
Yeah.
He wants to be in charge, and he's sure that the EU would be better. Yeah. And that's my understanding.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
But I was about to come to you, Stephen, because we've got a better deal because we're not in the European Union. This is vindication of Brexit and the EU. When somebody's tough, the EU caves in.
Well, hang on a second. I couldn't disagree with you more. If we got a better deal, we may go some way towards actually rebalancing the great appalling disaster that our economy suffered when we left the European Union in 2016. We're about halfway back to where we would have been had we remained in the EU. But the trouble with these Trump tariffs...
No, sorry, that is not true. Yeah. That is a complete lie. You just made that up.
Of course I didn't make it up.
Heard that
Somebody
statistic.
else made it up.
Yes, exactly. And you're repeating it. Yeah. There is no proof that there was any... We've had no change in our trade, not at all.
We've had
our trade with the EU has been exactly the same as our trade with non-EU countries. Both have been going down because we do not make anything anymore. One of our biggest exports used to be oil and gas. Our oil has dropped from about 50 million barrels to 30 million barrels. Our cars, our big export was petrol-driven cars. Well, we've got rid of them. The EU don't want to buy them anymore.
Hang on a second. Well, a great deal of our trade with the EU, with invisibles and financial services...
It's gone up.
It has not
they have gone up. They've gone up by about 8% in the last year.
People are moving out of the city of London in droves, and they're moving to Frankfurt and Paris and New York.
No, they're not. No one is moving to Frankfurt, Paris or New York.
Pop down to Canary Wharf and look at the for sale signs in Canary Wharf.
Yes, but they're going to Milan because Milan's giving them a special tax break if they go to Milan.
And Dubai.
And they're going to Dubai, which is not in the EU. Also much better tax breaks. And also Portugal was giving people tax breaks, but so many people went. I think they closed that loophole.
Indeed. But let's just get a couple of things straight about dealing with Trump, President Trump. Firstly, you never know what he's going to do next week. And the second thing is the idea of putting a tariff wall around an economy is something that the Soviet Union did for 70 years. And what it does is it ossifies your own industrial and manufacturing base. If you have no competition...
Well, that's what we agree on, because that's what the EU did. That's why we left.
No, I'm sorry. The EU actually has its own manufacturing base. It makes cars. It makes white goods.
No, but Catherine's absolutely right.
No, they are a customs union. They have a big border around them. They have massively high tariffs, especially on their agricultural.
There was a
goods.
home market preference scam, which I must admit that did exist, particularly in French manufacture. But overall, they didn't have a complete tariff wall around the whole of the European Union.
They
had non-tariff
That's
barriers.
exactly what they are. They're a customs union. They have tariffs. They have incredibly high tariffs on pretty much everything. The only things they let in for zero tariffs are the raw materials. So they will let in, say, soybeans in for zero, but soybean oil, they want you to they crush it in the EU, so they have a high tariff on soybean oil. Which they'll be putting on US soybean oil.
I think they still have a subsidy on tobacco too, which I thought
they do that.
But look, George Bush, when he was President of America, he actually tried to reinvigorate the Rust Belt in Detroit and the city by actually imposing this massive great tariff, almost a sort of Smoot-Hawley type tariff. And it was a disaster. It absolutely crashed the steel industry. And you have to have competition. I don't care what you say.
Well, but Trump's doing something more interesting than that, though, because, yes, he has put tariffs up on steel and aluminium, but he's also, in his big, beautiful bill, he is dropping you can now write off any increase in factories. So he's encouraging people to build things in the US. He's enabling them to build new factories, and they can write that off 100% in the first year. And also he's getting these massive deals to go to the US. So Japan is actually making things in the US, which is part of their trade deal. And part of the EU's trade deal is that they have to put investments into the US, and they have to buy oil and gas from the US and not from Russia, which is a brilliant thing to throw into a trade deal.
We've tried the free ports in this country. We've got the Teesside Authority. We've actually tried having these tariff-free zones. And do you remember the free port system?
Yes,
so what happened to
working.
that?
They exist.
So why aren't we in this country actually doing the same thing? Why aren't we saying, come and build your factory here? As I believe has actually happened with Amazon, with a couple of other companies. We've said, build your in a big... I think, weren't they talking about making some solar panels down in Somerset?
Because we've made ourselves a very high-cost economy.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem. We're strangling our economy with the net zero
high
rules.
cost of land, labour and capital. You mean?
The high cost of regulation of energy. We've got four times...
There was very little regulation in the free ports.
But still, energy is more expensive because we've got four times the industrial electricity prices of the United States. And
It's
if you think
actually
how much...
worse than that.
But the sooner we start
Because
building
that's the
wind
average
turbines, the
price.
better then.
But if you look at that state by state, because each state has its own energy, it's not a blanket thing like
that's why
in the
Texas
UK.
is a great disaster. They have
Well, that's why Louisiana is doing really well, because they have the cheapest energy in the US, where places, that average comes from including places like Hawaii that have incredibly expensive energy, and California, because they've got a lot of green stuff. And Alaska has very expensive energy, even though it has a lot of oil. It's obviously a pretty cold place to make energy.
Fortunately, we don't allow Scotland to actually consume all their own power, all their hydroelectric power.
Well, and all their own oil and gas. And even the wind is mainly up in Scotland.
So let's make the case for the United Kingdom here, rather than have a vociferous pot.
Well, let's stick to Trump, because Trump is not only doing things on trade, he is changing the terms of trade. What he's really done is he worked out that everyone was eating off the US dollar. And therefore he's gone round the world and he said, look, I've had enough of this.
In terms of NATO, absolutely.
NATO, the EU, and they've quite rightly caved in. But there's also the other things. He's cut taxes, his big, beautiful bill, and he's dealing with immigration. This is amazing, because this government, and indeed, I'm afraid to say, the predecessor government, have been all at sea in terms of immigration.
This idea of the cutting taxes, he's cut taxes for the wealthy people, and he's actually abandoned Medicare and Medicaid. You know, they're sort of similar to the NHS.
Well, abandon is an exaggeration.
Well, I'm sorry, it has been decimated. But look, don't forget, he's got a land border. It's a lot easier to defend a land border than it is to defend a sea border.
Why?
Why?
Because you can actually put a physical barrier. You cannot put a physical barrier in the British, in La Manche.
Australia was protecting a sea border, and they've done very well.
Australia had 2,000 miles between it and
Vietnam. But most people would say a sea border is easier to defend than a land border.
Well, it is if you're like Australian. You've got 48 small islands that you can put people on, although I have to say the Australian public weren't too happy with that.
They used to put them in the desert. Much better.
Well, there we go. Alligator Alcatraz, that's what we're going to get.
You anticipate me, Minister.
But not in Somerset. Anyway, thanks to my panel. In a moment, I will be joined by the Bracknell Councillor, who was reported to the Rozzers for the crime of raising concerns about the migrant hotel regime.
Rozzers?
The Rozzers.
The Rozzers.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we have found some peacocks, so we've been speaking to people today, hearing from them how much of a nuisance they say they are. It is a real mix though here. Some people saying that actually they're all right, they're part of the furniture of this village now. You can see this peacock here showing all of its feathers. I'm going to be very honest with you, we have just seen it attempt to mate the peahen that you can see behind it there. And this showing of feathers is part of the thing, what they do to try, part of the mating call here as well, to try and show all of the feathers off and everything like that. And there's a thing that they do, train rattling as well. I wonder if Mr. Peacock might talk to us. Mr. Peacock, would you?
Come on, Jack. Come on, Jack. We need you to get involved.
Not sure. GB News, Jack.
This is your big David Attenborough moment, Jack.
Any questions to say to the nuisance you might be causing people? Any response?
Although this feels a little bit intimate now. There's a bit of a moment going on. It's all got a bit voyeuristic.
Very happy to talk to us so far this morning, but some residents of Tupprey here have spoken to us this morning. Take a listen to what they've told us about what they think about all these peacocks.
They've been here longer than I have, so I've lived in the house I live in at the top here 47 years. They've been there all that time because they were from the castle to start with. The people at the castle used to have them, and they're just part of the village.
I hate them. When they do all that damage, it's heartbreaking, you know. Yeah, round them up and take them to a farm or a zoo, where they're supposed to be.
They're like the furniture. They should stay around here. You know, people just need to let them get on with what they are. They're nature's animals, and they deserve to live around here, don't they?
GB News, the People's Channel.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record. You say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about Donald Trump, and the mail mogs have come in. Jeff says, Jacob, don't you think it's odd for a foreign leader to lecture us on domestic politics? It breaches all the basic rules of diplomacy. Yes, I'm not sure that Donald Trump always wins the diplomacy prize if in international forums. And James says, Sir Keir Starmer has become the caddy for the Donald. Yes, indeed. I wonder whether he provides the right golf club as called upon. And Phil says, do you think Nigel Farage will be the man to put the UK first and bring Trump-esque policies? Yeah, well, there's a thought. Over the weekend, it emerged the government has set up a police unit to monitor social media posts expressing anti-migrant sentiment amid fears of a summer of unrest. Well, my next guest, independent councillor for Bracknell Forest, Councillor John Edwards, has found himself under investigation by the council after expressing concerns about the housing of Afghan migrants in a local hotel. Councillor Edwards said he was accused of inciting hate and spreading misinformation against an ethnic group, with a councillor colleague claiming online she had reported him to the Rozzers and the Ministry of Defence. She's probably one of those nutters who's written to the Pope and the King as well.
In green ink, almost certainly.
Indeed. I used to get letters like that where there was a member of Parliament. Anyway, I'm now joined by the man himself, John Edwards. Mr. Edwards, thank you for joining me. So tell me, what did you do? What is this shocking thing that you have done that has offended one of your fellow councillors?
Well, in April, I raised concerns about 300 Afghan migrants being resettled into a four-star hotel in Bracknell. And for that, I've been intimidated, isolated, and now formally investigated by Bracknell Forest. That's included calls to the police, telling that I've been hateful, incited racial hatred, and launching a formal investigation. They've refused, so this is Bracknell Forest now, so they've launched a formal investigation for me for scrutinising a policy which is of national interest and local impact. But they haven't shared any evidence with me. When I say what part of my post constitutes a breach of the code of conduct, which bits were discriminatory, which bits, whatever they've charged me for, they refuse to share it with me. There's a briefing call. Councillors had a briefing call explaining the situation. So there's key evidence on this. And they've refused to share that with me, a recording of it, despite it being shared with other councillors, because this crazy ruling that they think it will mean a crime being committed. But of course, none of this is totally baseless. The police have never contacted me, either because she never actually reported me, or it's just baseless. So yes, it's very worrying. It's a very frightening attack on free speech.
So the councillors reported you to the police, but as far as you know, the police haven't taken any action. They haven't interviewed you. They haven't opened a case, as far as you're aware. So the police seem to have behaved properly, in your view?
Well, they can't do anything because I've done absolutely nothing wrong. I've raised.
What did you actually say?
That doesn't follow. I raised concerns about how this will impact housing, how it will impact health, how it will impact education, and was vetting done. And now we know that actually it will impact housing, it will impact health, and it will impact all the other things. So that's what I raised. And actually in my post, I was always clear that the arrival has got nothing to do with the people arriving. They've got to be treated with respect and dignity and have safety. This is just policy focused.
Yeah, but are they legal or illegal migrants?
They're legal because they've come through a legal pathway. They're from Afghanistan. They're part of this scandal. Part of them, probably. Yeah.
So they're legal migrants. But one of the unfairnesses seems to me to be that you must get people coming to see you who you represent, who want to get housing, and they're told that the waiting list is interminable, they're not going to get it. And then people get fast-tracked who have been brought in from overseas and get put up in hotels at vast expense. This just seems desperately unfair on your existing constituents.
It is so unfair, Jacob. I put out a post asking for residents who are on the housing waiting list to see what type of experience they have, to see if they're getting equal support. I was inundated with nothing but heartbreaking stories. We've got single mothers in one-bed flats with 4 kids, 1 bedroom, they all share 1 bedroom. They have to keep the windows open to keep the humidity down because the mould is so bad. The mould goes over her bed linen, up her walls, over her kids' toys. She throws the toys out, she washes the bed linen, she cleans the walls, but it's not enough, it keeps coming back. She has been given no help. There is a veteran, he's got 2 daughters, 3 and 5, again, 1-bed flat with him and his wife. Both daughters have been hospitalised with respiratory conditions, no help for them. He actually contacted me, he served in Afghanistan. He said, John, I know what these people did for us, and I want them to be safe, and I want to help them, but where's my help? And Jacob, this single mother, she also said something poignant to me. She said, John, I feel like I failed. I feel like I failed my kids. And I said, you haven't failed. You have been failed. You've been failed by a system which has forgotten about you and is now falling over itself to help other people. And this is what I'm scrutinising.
And it's a political decision, isn't it, that there are limited resources, there's never enough money to do everything governments want to do, and it's perfectly reasonable for you as an elected councillor to say, I think money should be spent on our own residents rather than on people who have come in from abroad. That is just a perfectly normal exercise of your right to freedom of speech.
Yeah, that is totally normal. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just normal, it's actually my responsibility to scrutinise these projects, to scrutinise screens. And the thing is that one of the things I asked about was vetting. And I asked through a freedom of information request, has the council checked any of the level of vetting? And it turns out not one officer, i.e. members of this council or councillors, checked the level of vetting. I mean, that is extraordinary. And then we learn that people who once failed the vetting, who weren't allowed, have now been come in, and some of them have been charged with sexual or violent crimes. Now we learn Taliban members have come in. Taliban members, and according to the report, one Afghan official said that these people have British troops' bloods on their hands. it is difficult to think of a policy more scandalous than this when we've got homeless veterans and now Taliban members put up in hotels at our expense. So yes, I mean, not only is it right, it is my duty to scrutinise.
It's your duty. John, thank you for joining me. It seems to me the reason they want to shut you up is because they're embarrassed about what has actually happened. But I think we have got a statement from the council. Bracknell Forest Council has said, as the matter raised is under investigation, it would not be appropriate, dreadful New Labour word, for the council to comment further at this time. Well, they can come on. Let me give an invitation to somebody from Bracknell Council to come on and defend what they've done and what they have failed to do. Shortly, new shocking migrant crime data have been revealed, which proves what we all knew to be true about mass migration.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello there. We've got some severe thunderstorms on the way across many parts of Italy and the Balkans on Monday and Tuesday. But the good news is the extreme heat across Greece and Turkey is slowly easing, though there are unfortunately still a few wildfires around in places. Those showers also across parts of Italy, maybe the Pyrenees as well. But most of Iberia dry, sunny and settled, as indeed it will be across parts of Madeira and the Canary Islands. Lots of sunshine on the way and very warm, if not hot, over the next few days.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Good evening, this is your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Now there could be some fairly heavy showery rain for some of us, especially towards the south as we go through tomorrow. But before that, we do have a band of rain that's coming in from the west. That's because although we have an Azores high to the southwest of us, there is a frontal system coming over the north of this. And this is going to bring a fair bit of cloud across parts of Northern Ireland as we go through the end of today, and then rain sweeping in. And then that cloud and rain is going to feed into western parts of Scotland, England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. Further east, it's staying dry with some clear skies, under which temperatures may just about dip into single figures. Elsewhere, though, it's a relatively warm night, quite humid as well. Humidity is high to go along with the fairly damp weather across western parts. Then as we go through tomorrow morning and starting off across much of Scotland, it's actually looking largely dry. A few spots of rain here and there towards the east, but some bright spells too. A wetter, cloudier, greyer picture towards the far west, however. Similar across Northern Ireland, the rain will be starting to push through, but a damp start for many here, and also pretty wet across western parts of England and much of Wales. Some fairly persistent rain, and there could be some heavier outbreaks of rain mixed in with it. Further east, it's a drier start to the day, and there will be some brightness, but as that whole frontal system makes its way gradually southeastwards, we are going to see many places across the east turning cloudier and some outbreaks of rain feeding in. Worth bearing in mind that the rain's going to break up a little bit, turn more showery, but could turn quite heavy across southern parts. Could even be a bit of thunder mixed in, but staying dry towards the northeast of Scotland. As we go through into Wednesday, and that high towards the southwest I mentioned does try to become a bit more dominant. And so whilst there will be some showery bursts of rain around, they're not looking especially heavy. They're going to be quite scattered, and so many of us will stay largely dry with some dry spells in between any of those showers. And then some more changeable weather to come as we go through the end of the week, but some warm sunshine as well. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Well, welcome back. We were talking about migrant crime and freedom of speech, and I think Jane makes a very fair point, which we should always remember. Mustn't we remember to sympathise with the people in these hotels across the country? Even if they break the rules, they clearly don't have very much and remain human beings at the end of the day. I think that's true. It doesn't undermine the unfairness if they're being treated better than people who've lived here a long time. Alex says, I can't speak for the entire public, but it feels the atmosphere is thick with a seething tension that spells trouble for this summer. And Sue says, how did the left become so powerful in this country that they were able effectively to criminalise their political opponents? That is a very good question. Well, the awful consequences of mass migration are becoming clearer. As data have revealed, 4 in 10 people charged with serious sex attacks in London are foreign nationals. This information obtained by the Centre for Migration Control from the Metropolitan Police, and it revealed that Romanians were the highest offenders in terms of raw numbers and Afghans were the highest proportionately. Well, my most incisive panel is with me, Stephen Pound and Catherine McBride. Catherine, this is really worrying, isn't it? Because we not only have a very large number of people who've come in, but we don't know their backgrounds, particularly if they've come in illegally, and we have a real problem with crime in London. London has become a really rather unpleasant city.
Yeah, it's terrible, and also most people will tell you that the police aren't turning up for incidents, so you've got to sort of protect yourself now. And that's not a good place for London to go to either. We're going right back to sort of the 1800s. And there are other problems with the people that are coming in. We should be sending the illegal immigrants straight back to France. And if you want to bring in proper refugees, go to the refugee camps and bring in actual women and children, not people pretending to be. Which
David Cameron, to his great credit, did,
yes.
Which I thought was a very good scheme and a proper scheme.
A much better scheme.
I know, and I remember actually visiting Amman in Jordan, where they actually had a United Nations administered route into this country. It's perfectly safe. And it always used to, I don't know about you, Jacob, but people used to come to my surgery and say, oh, I paid an agent to bring me over here. And it was never, ever the starving housewife working in a poppy field in Afghanistan. It was always the son of a rich trader or merchant who could pay. But look, I think on these figures, and on the surface, they're pretty terrifying. There's two different things here. There are large numbers of people, and you think of the Colombian pickpockets, some of the Romanian people who this awful scams they do, who are coming over here. These are not the same as the illegal immigrants. I think with the illegal immigrants, and this is a more worrying thing, this is what's happening, as you know, in the Essex case, you've got large numbers of very often young men, bored out of their brain, getting, 94p a day or something, sitting around all day, waiting for their Home Office interview. And you could almost understand how they get bored. It's just like, when I was 15 and 16, and we used to get bored, we'd do silly things. I won't tell you what we were doing, but, silly stuff.
I thought you were a server at Mass and were attending to your religious duties, Stephen. I'm shocked.
But I did feel guilty afterwards, I have to say, about playing knockdown
you went to
ginger.
confession afterwards.
But look, the reality is, I think, can we just all agree on one thing? If we could only process the immigrants of this country as quickly as possible, if they're entitled to be here, let's get them working and paying tax. If they're not entitled to be here, on the next boat out.
But on this story is actually about violent sex attacks. It's not about the scammers. These are, and that's
well, so the Essex case is he tried to kiss a girl, didn't he?
We are bringing in a whole bunch of men and not bringing in the women and children with them.
Yeah.
And the women and the children are being left in Afghanistan and they're not allowed to even talk to anyone. They're wearing full face coverings. They're not allowed outside.
Bricking up the windows of the kitchens.
They're treated so badly, and yet we happily let the men in. And it's like, no, let the women in. Stop this.
But also we can't get rid of them. So, Stephen, we all agree that they should be removed, but they then say, and we covered this on this programme, that their son likes chicken McNuggets and they can't be removed. And the ridiculousness of human rights law has meant that people commit quite serious crimes and then they manage to stay here. And that's undermining confidence. I'm going to come back to Alex's point, seething tension. I think there is real anger amongst the British public at the moment, of type I haven't seen before, and you're more experienced.
Well, it's pretty much what Nigel Farage was saying last week. But look, I think the reality is that I entirely agree with you about the ridiculous, chicken McNugget stuff, but that is British judges interpreting British law. It's not ECHR. But look, the other thing is we can't deport someone to Tehran. If we have somebody who comes from Iran, seeks sanctuary here, and we say, no, back on the mullahs will be sharpening their scimitars on the airport runway. We can't deport people to Afghanistan. So that's the real problem. Because there's no plane of ours could land in Afghanistan. How could we get... Look, at the moment, there's 2.5 million people are being forced over the border from Pakistan and Iran, Afghan nationals. They're being forced over the border there, and nobody has any contact. There are British citizens in Afghanistan.
But Syria now has a new government. Can we now start sending people back to Syria who have been here?
It depends which part. I mean, in southern Syria, they're slaughtering the Druze, and the Druze are slaughtering the Bedouin. I mean, it's not exactly, Bridlington-on-Sea out there.
Yeah, but while we have the good Syrians here, and I'm sure they're very nice people, you won't get a nice Syria if you keep all of the good guys in Britain and France and wherever they've escaped to. You really need, if you want to rebuild Syria, you need to get those people to go back to their country.
Well, of course. But what you won't get, if you have a group of people over here living in what we crudely call a ghetto community, a closed community, a monocultural community, where their own standards, it's always the lowest common denominator. You get someone who's a religious leader, and he will say that this is haram, this is illegal, you shouldn't do this. And there's no integration with the outside community. That is the real problem. We don't actually have any degree of integration.
I 100% agree.
And so it brings out the worst
is
in
not
people.
so much immigration as integration, because as you can hear, I'm an immigrant. But I'm an immigrant who's slotted right into British culture.
In all honesty, you tell me anybody in this country, who isn't got some foreign blood in them. You've got a bit of French in you, I believe, haven't you? Or your children have.
Well, my wife may have. But, I have a solid line of Somerset.
Saxons.
From the Saxons. But it's the crime as well. And that London seems to be a lawless city.
Just exactly the point that Dr McBride said. Because it's the broken window theory. There are people walking up and down Oxford Street, walking, steaming, going into shops, grabbing and stuff and walking out. Why, in God's name, aren't we dealing with that? Why aren't we actually blocking, shutting the shops if someone is in there and only letting them out if they have a receipt? Why don't we have, that oldest cliche in the book, the feet on the beat, the feet on the street? Why don't we have a visible police presence? Police officers will always say it's not cost-effective. Well, I don't know about cost-effective because it could be preventative.
I completely agree with you.
Preventative, very much so. If you can see police there, you're less likely to shoplift, but you're also less likely to try and sexually attack someone who's looks vulnerable.
Unless you're a
walking
police
down the street.
officer.
But we've got more police in this country than we've ever had before. It may have gone down by 1,500 last year, but broadly, record numbers of police, and yet nobody...
As a proportion of population, no.
Nobody sees them.
But
why aren't they?
Are they sort of monitoring, are they DEI officers? Are they sort of managers? Is it...
Jacob, I realise this is the state of the nation. It's not the state of London. But forgive me for saying, in London, we're closing nearly all the police stations. There's only going to be about 14 places in the whole of the metropolis where you can actually come and report. Now, okay, I don't want to get all misty-eyed about it, but you to go and report a lost dog or used to hand in lost property. That is not going to happen. The police will say, we can solve more crime, driving around in cars, and people should report it online. Well, I'm sorry. When Granny Smith down the road gets mugged, she's not going to go online and report it. It's outrageous.
If they've just taken your phone, you can't report it online.
Good point.
It's amazing how people think you can do things online when the most common thing that's getting stolen at the moment are phones.
But it's also a base for the police to be in. So if you're around Westminster, you see endless numbers of police vans full of police sitting there waiting to do something. When they had the Rochester Road Police Station, they had a base that they could be in where they might be able to do more useful work in the interim.
We had the blue light, the blue lamp outside, and you could actually go that way. When I was on the buses for a long time, and very often we'd get a runaway would come on the bus, and you knew that they were a runaway. And we used to get my driver would actually stop at the police station, even if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we'd actually go in and ask the desk sergeant to come out and say, we've got a girl here, I'm 90% certain she's a runaway and she's vulnerable. And it worked. It's not flipping rocket science.
Well, we've got a huge amount of agreement with my most incisive morning, isn't it? We'll get disagreement later, but in a moment, we will reveal the untold story of how 1 million white Europeans were taken as slaves by the North African states under the Ottoman Empire.
The Barbary Pass.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
Only on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're
the failure is...
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, in an age when the righteous left indulge in national self-flagellation, where they wish to celebrate every culture except their own, where they try to pull down statues of heroic colonial figures and try to pretend our past is evil, we wanted to shed some light on the untold story of the slave trade. A new book by historian Justin Morozzi details the extent of the North African slave trade, which in total took 1 million white European slaves, many of whom were kidnapped on the south coast of these islands. And while the UK abolished slavery in the early 19th century, the first country to do so, this hidden slave trade continued well into the 20th century. Well, I'm joined now by the historian Rafe Hadel-Manku. Rafe, thank you very much for coming in. This is really interesting, isn't it? Because the Ottoman Empire, the great empire run from Constantinople after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, was a slave empire. The people who served the Ottoman Sultan were slaves, and many of them were eunuchs as well.
Yes, the Arabic and the Muslim slave trade, because slavery in what is today the Muslim world long predates Islam, but it is the world's second oldest and second most prolific slave trading force after Africa. Africa's had slavery for thousands of years. It still carries on today, as it does actually also in the Muslim world today. But, you know, the core period we're talking about, millions of slaves in total were sent to the Arab world, and lots of them came in through the slave ports of the Barbary Coast. And by the Barbary Coast, we're talking about the region covered by the modern-day states of Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and Libya. And the white slave trade, which is what the Barbary slave trade we're talking about was around 350 to 400 years, which is longer than the British Empire slave trade lasted. And they seized at least 1 million white Europeans, by seizing ships that had European crew, but also by raids on towns and villages across the coast of Europe. Obviously the Mediterranean, modern-day Greece and Italy, but also Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Scotland, England, Denmark. They went as far north as Iceland and as far east as the Slavs. And, of course, the name for Slavs means slave, and that's because the Slavs, by different Arab trade, Muslim trade, slave traders, went to Spain in the 9th century. But the Barbary slave trade we're talking about was essentially from the 1500s to around, you could say, the early 1800s officially, but unofficially, of course, it carried on long after. And, of course, you know, they had a foothold on English soil. Many people may not be aware that the island of Lundy, which is in the Bristol Channel, had the Moroccan slave flag flying above it for years. And it's from there that they would mount these slave raids across the southwest into Dorset, Cornwall, Devon, Gloucestershire. Your beloved Somerset even fell prey to them. The slaves were transferred to the Lundy Islands, and from Lundy they went to Algiers, which is one of the largest slave markets, and from there they went into the Muslim world. And, of course, there are many black politicians in this country and in America who descend from slaves, but I'm not sure many people may be aware that Boris Johnson's great-great-great-grandmother was a white slave from the West, from the white slave trade. She was a Circassian, which are a group of people that came from the northern Black Sea up to the Caucasus, which, of course, is where we have Caucasian from, and his father, Stanley, has written about this, and they think that's where their famous blonde hair comes from.
And his ancestor was actually bought in the slave market by another of his ancestors.
By another of his ancestors,
yes,
and that's where the Turkish connection comes in.
And so the question is, should we therefore look at the people who are involved with this and their descendants and say, we want reparations? Should we go to Turkey and say, look, we would like some reparations for all of this, for the people taken from Somerset? Or should we say, this was history, this is what happened, that all nations have barbarous parts of their past, and that's just the way it is, because it seems to me the whole reparations argument is very, very one-sided. The only people who basically should ever pay reparations are the UK, not Turkey, and that seems to me to be absurd.
Yes, well, sensible viewers of GB News, and all GB News viewers are sensible, would say, of course not. That's in the long, distant past. The sins of the father mustn't be meted out onto the son. And, of course, out of a population of millions, there were only a few thousand slave owners in this country. The vast majority of Britons descend from people who lived lives akin to serfdom. Why on earth should their descendants be forced to pay taxes for this sort of thing out of their tax money? But, of course, what's most interesting is that the far left never make those arguments, and they never think about not only, of course, the Arab slave trade, but there were more Africans held in bondage by other Africans than were ever transported across the ocean. There were brutal human sacrifice rituals that killed thousands of African slaves every year in the kingdoms of Benin and Dahomey in West Africa. That's never spoken about. Also never spoken about is the issue of modern-day slavery, where there are 7 in every 1,000 Africans today is a slave, according to the International Labour Organization. That's about 10 million people. That's never spoken about. The kings who are the descendants of the kings who enslaved Africans are still on the thrones in places like the Ashanti Kingdom in Ghana. No call for reparations there. Instead, what we have, for example, is the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who has erected the Khan turnip in London as a slave memorial, and he wants to have another 5 of these memorials across the British Empire slave trading route. So he's gone on a jolly to Ghana to announce the first of these monuments will be in Accra, another in Ghana. Now, why not also have monuments to the African slave trade and what the Africans, or indeed what the Muslims are doing to white Europeans and white British people? Why is there no slave memorial in Dorset or in Lundy or in fact in Somerset?
Or why don't we go to the Victoria Tower Gardens and look at the Buxton Memorial to the abolition of the slave trade and slavery in the British Empire in 1833, came into effect in 1834, and the Ottoman Empire stopped slave trading because it was defeated in the First World War. And who was it defeated by? It was defeated by us. And if you look at what the Royal Navy was doing in the late 19th century, it is stopping slavery. So the ending of slavery is something of which we can be immeasurably proud. And the responsibility for slaving is something that happened in every society until relatively modern times.
That's right. That's the critical point. Slavery was universal. To match the beautiful Buxton Memorial, which is currently under renovation in Victoria Gardens, there needs to be a West Africa Squadron memorial. The West Africa Squadron was the British Royal Navy squadron that tried to enforce an end to the slave trade. We expended a sum equivalent to 2% of our GDP. That's a sum equivalent to our modern defence budget. That was the first time in human history, I think, where a nation deliberately made itself poorer in order to advance a moral good. And that's what's unique about the Protestant ethic that went through this country, the evangelical movement, which really saw all humans as being equal. That was unparalleled outside of Western Europe.
And even the less actively evangelical politicians, say Palmerston, risks our relations with both Portugal and indeed with the United States because he believes that stopping the slave trade is so important. And he's not. His son-in-law's very evangelical, but Palmerston wasn't really particularly interested in religion. It was a fundamental driving force of British politics in the 19th century. Prince Albert's first speech
1840.
Is made about stopping slavery, and it's rather brave because he is making it to all the great and the good of London in what is not his own language, and is going for a controversial, brave issue. So the drive, the moral drive to stop slavery is essentially a very British activity.
Very British, not uniquely British, but extremely British and unparalleled prior to that point. And that, as I said, that apology was made in 1840 very powerfully by the Prince Consort. That's why there's no need for any member of the current royal family to make any apology on this point. And it has to be said, the first half of the British Empire you can quite rightly criticise for many terrible things that happened, and also in the second half. But the second half of the British Empire was really about atoning for the sins of the first half to a great extent. And as awful as slavery was, no one can deny that the benefits of colonialism we can still see today in parliamentary democracy, in the rule of law, common law, the judiciary, the police, the army, hospitals, medicine, universities, schools, the list goes on. That was the legacy of the British Empire. Remember, Britain was only in Africa from really the 1880s. If you look at the scramble for Africa until the 1980s, only for 100 years or so. And that, the majority of that, you could say, had left a very great legacy behind there. But the other point I want to make is Sadiq Khan is always telling us he's the son of a Pakistani bus driver. Pakistan is the global centre of slavery today. He went on an official state visit and he never mentioned slavery once.
As we finish this section to strains of Flanders and Swan, the English are best, I say thank you very much to Rafe. And finally, speaking of self-flagellation and masochism, a gentle yet sombre acknowledgement of the fact that the National Trust is not all that it should be, because it may be about to bring an end to the era of homemade scones, opting instead for bought-in alternatives in what is the latest reason to cancel your membership. My homemade scones, not made by me, are absolutely delicious, and I put butter, then jam, then cream. That's the Somerset way. Anyway, up next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys to have more conversation about Somerset. Patrick, what else will you be talking about this evening?
Well, the unrelenting squirmathon between Sir Keir Starmer and President Trump. What a fantastic job Bev Turner did. This is what you can do when GB News is actually given the same access as other media outlets. You don't get the same pre-prepared guff. No, we actually ask the questions that are on people's minds. We're going to be reviewing that. Also, we've got an exclusive for you. We think we might have found a new whopping great big site that's going to be used for asylum seekers in central London. All of that and much more after the weather in Somerset.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, this is your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Now there could be some fairly heavy showery rain for some of us, especially towards the south as we go through tomorrow. But before that, we do have a band of rain that's coming in from the west. That's because although we have an Azores high to the southwest of us, there is a frontal system coming over the north of this. And this is going to bring a fair bit of cloud across parts of Northern Ireland as we go through the end of today, and then rain sweeping in. And then that cloud and rain is going to feed into western parts of Scotland, England and Wales as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. Further east, it's staying dry with some clear skies, under which temperatures may just about dip into single figures. Elsewhere, though, it's a relatively warm night, quite humid as well. Humidity is high to go along with the fairly damp weather across western parts. Then, as we go through tomorrow morning and starting off across much of Scotland, it's actually looking largely dry. A few spots of rain here and there towards the east, but some bright spells too. A wetter, cloudier, greyer picture towards the far west, however. Similar across Northern Ireland, the rain will be starting to push through, but a damp start for many here, and also pretty wet across western parts of England and much of Wales. Some fairly persistent rain, and there could be some heavier outbreaks of rain mixed in with it. Further east, it's a drier start to the day, and there will be some brightness, but As that whole frontal system makes its way gradually southeastwards, we are going to see many places across the east turning cloudier and some outbreaks of rain feeding in. Worth bearing in mind that the rain's going to break up a little bit, turn more showery, but could turn quite heavy across southern parts. Could even be a bit of thunder mixed in, but staying dry towards the northeast of Scotland. As we go through into Wednesday, and that high towards the southwest I mentioned does try to become a bit more dominant. And so whilst there will be some showery bursts of rain around, they're not looking especially heavy. They're going to be quite scattered, and so many of us will stay largely dry with some dry spells in between any of those showers. And then some more changeable weather to come as we go through the end of the week, but some warm sunshine as well. Bye-bye.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can win big, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? The holiday of a lifetime? Or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? Lines close on the 1st of August, so make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The people